Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, why did the Board of Education wait until after the election to eliminate religious names from the school holiday calendar? What does Governor-elect Hogan do now? And does the loss by Anthony Brown hurt Martin O'Malley's presidential ambitions? And why should state colleges charge tuition based on a family's ability to pay? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the former Majority Leader of the Maryland House of Delegates, John Hurson, Republican activist Jerry Cave, former chairperson of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, and media consultant Steve Simon. Stay tuned for this and more on the next 21 This Week. Just a week after the November election, the Montgomery County School Board voted to strip the names of Christian and Jewish holidays from its school calendar, rather than give equal treatment to Muslim holidays. Many on the right see the decision by the school board as an appeasement to Muslim families, yet those on the left were dismayed by the action. Former state delegate Shoaib Ali stated, by stripping the names Christmas, Easter, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, they have alienated other communities now, and we are no closer to equality. It's a pretty drastic step, and they did it without any public notification. John, why did the school board feel compelled to act? According to the Gazette newspapers, approximately 5.6% of students and 5% of teachers observed Muslim holidays last year. Hardly enough to cause major disruptions in the school system as large as Montgomery County's. So why now?
I will tell you, I have no idea. I think it was a bad decision. I remember being majority leader down in the House of Delegates, and because there was a lot of disruption around the prayer that started the session every day, we decided to cancel the prayer. Not a good idea. And I think people in government need to respect religious holidays and keep them on the calendar. And if there are more religious holidays you have to put on the calendar, then put them on the calendar. I mean, it's not like these kids will they'll be absent from the school system for those holidays that they're going to celebrate. I don't understand why they did this. I think it was a mistake.
Jerry, is the point that the former delegate Ali made about the lack of public notification a concern?
There's two issues here. The good nuns that taught us in school taught us there was two ways to lie. One's just telling a lie, and the other is a lie of omission. And what they did by holding this until after the election was a lie of omission. And they didn't need to. It wasn't going to cost them an election, it wasn't going to cost them any seats, but that's the first problem. The second problem is this. Our culture is based on the Judeo-Christian code, and even if you're not a practicing Christian or Jew, that's our culture. And to expunge it from our culture is a bad idea.
I can't believe I'm saying this. I agree with Jerry. I mean, this is amazing.
Well, we got 8 more minutes to kill. So
I know,
let me
this will last.
Mark, there are those that suggest that the school board is too powerful, too big, too independent, and it should be supervised more closely by the county council.
Well, the first part of that question was right, but the solution was wrong. The last thing you want is the county council to be more involved. What instead we want is for parents to be more involved in being able to make decisions about their kids. Right now, we've got a school system that's mid-20th century mass production model. We need to allow for parents to have more input and there to be more variety and have the parents have some say in what that variety is.
But here's the other part to that, Mark. The fact is that the school system itself, it takes up 55% of the county budget. And the county council really has no say in how that money is spent. The county council needs to be more involved, and the county executive needs to be more involved in school decisions.
I think you just create a prescription for politicizing the whole process. Not that it isn't already, but you're certainly not going to improve the process by getting the county council
But
involved.
Casey has a point. I mean, there is an issue related to how much budgetary control that the council has over, you know, the school budget, and it's not a lot, and that is not a good thing. I mean,
And transparency.
Actually,
I
yeah,
mean,
there's
we all
not a
agree
lot of
about
transparency.
Yeah.
And one of the suggestions that Saki, I believe, has already made is say, take it up at budget time, put pressure on them then to change this policy by holding the budget back.
That's one of the best pieces of news I've heard, Casey, that if the county council, that cast of characters doesn't have that much influence over 55% of the budget, that's really good news.
No,
Yeah,
but
the
what
problem
they do,
is
what
the
they
people who do
what-
have influence over it are not your friends.
But it's a double-edged sword, Jerry, because there's so little attention paid to school board elections, and the teachers union have such a strong say on those that are going to be elected. There's no independent voice on the school board. Furthermore, somebody's got to come up with the money to pay for it, and the county council and the county executive do have that responsibility of balancing the budget.
When I ran for office, I met with a friend of mine who's been involved in charter schools in D.C. for 30 years. And he said, the first thing you need to know about education when it comes to politics is that it's not about the children. It's about putting all this left-wing agenda out. It's about the teachers union. And the people ought to be ashamed of themselves not being focused on educating the children. That's what they ought to be focused on, and keep all this nonsense out of it.
So I want to come to Steve now. Steve, the motion to eliminate the religious names was authored by Rebecca, and I'm not going to even try. Spondrowski. What do we know about her?
Well, we know one thing, that your mention of credit cards and all that has absolutely nothing to do with this, I think, and the motion that was made here. But I want to bring up another point about having this vote when they did. You talk about it after the election. What they did do is completely suppress any opportunity for the superintendent of schools to actually make any news about his state of the schools. That was the same day he's out rolling out the state of the schools. He's got a couple of thousand people at Strathmore. You're not going to find that in the news because they took this action and they made national news, not just local news, but they made national news, probably not in the best way for Montgomery County on that particular day. And that same night, you had pitchforks up at Baker Middle School for some of the things that have been going on with sexual incidents in the school. So this is what took the news cycle. You kind of got to wonder about the superintendent of schools who had some information to share that day, and none of that came out. It was all about
this is another reason why I think this is a school board run amok. They have total disregard for the county council. They have total disregard for the school board superintendent. I mean, these guys have got to be reined in at some point, and more accountability.
Well, you're going to see one new school board member. You're going to see if that makes somewhat of a change in terms of a real new face, and one that was not part of coming in on the teachers union.
I mean, there needs to be. I hate using the word diversity, but there has to be a greater diversity. I mean, just having.
There's no diversity of ideas with these
That's
people.
the point.
It's you having diversity in skin color and ethnic, that is so passe, it's 50 years old. They need to have diversity of ideas, especially because, well, education's supposed to be about being creative, and they aren't creative at all. They have no new ideas, and they've gotten away from educating the children.
Well, what was also interesting was last week there were several surveys released about the best school systems in the nation and the best high schools in the nation, and Montgomery County didn't crack the top 10.
The most important thing that's happening
lists.
in education is what Bobby Jindal's doing in Orleans Parish. He's turned half of Orleans Parish into charter schools, 50% improvement in grade performance and graduation. They're now turning the entire Orleans Parish.
Jerry, that's apples.
It's a new
Jerry,
idea.
that's apples and oranges.
But it's
because
focused on educating the children.
Jerry, that's apples and oranges because they had a long way to go up.
Yeah.
You just can't.
It's a different
you just can't say
state.
that.
You can't compare things like that.
So whenever anybody comes up with a new idea, you start throwing fruit at it.
Look, there has been debates in this state, in this county, about charter schools. Those are good debates, and I think you have a legitimate point.
And you're endorsing charter schools?
No, I'm not endorsing charter schools, but I'm telling you there is a reasonable debate about charter schools.
You're going to have the last word, John. We're going to go because I'm really hot about this next topic. Are low in-state college tuitions a handout to the rich? That was a rather unique view expressed by columnist Fred Hyatt in the Washington Post recently. According to Hyatt, most states, including Maryland, have a policy of subsidizing the cost of college education by supporting the university system through state funding. What a shock. According to Wallace Lowe, the president of the University of Maryland at College Park, Maryland has the highest median income in the entire nation, but gives proportionately the least amount of financial aid, which in the view of Sandy Baum at the Urban Institute is a subsidy to affluent people. Mark, in the article, Hyatt relates that governors and university presidents do not want to discuss this issue because taxpayers believe they're owed a bargain in return for the taxes they pay, and politicians don't want to disappoint them. So why are taxpayers so stupid?
Well, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I have 2 college tuitions going on right now, although they're out of state and we're subsidizing in Colorado. The real question here is reining in the cost of college education. It's not figuring out a new pocket to pick in order to get more money. College costs have gone up disproportionately faster than the cost of everything else, and part of it is because new money such as student loans has been made available and the schools have just taken more in. Other states have done a great job, and other governors in other states have been focused on how do you use tele-education, different distance learning, different ways, changes in the schedule so you don't have to do 4 years, you can condense it to drive the cost of education down.
All right, thank you, Mark. Steve, President Lowe is characterized as supporting a proposal to actually have upper middle and higher income families pay higher tuition because they can afford to absorb an increase in tuition. Does that seem fair?
Well, look, I know one thing. We go back to the affordability issue, and that is the big problem. But I know the worst 2 days of the year in my household over the last 6 or 7 years with paying tuitions and everything is actually filling out that FAFSA. And I got to say, my wife has taken the brunt of it because I threw up my hands about it years ago. Putting that FAFSA in every year, anybody that's ever had to apply for financial aid for your kids knows you come back, and if you're in that middle group, what you're going to find is you're going to get loan packages and things like that.
But while you're filling this out, while you're filling out those forms, how would you feel if they came back and said, oh, you can afford to pay more than Mark here? Would you think that was fair?
I think it may be an issue worth looking at. It's going to be a tough road, but I think it may be an issue worth looking at to have some difference. Because
I want to go
right now,
back to the legislator on this because this is a matter of public policy. John, does it make sense for public policy to have a system of progressive tuitions?
I don't think so.
We have progressive income taxes.
I mean, we have an enormously progressive income tax,
That's
probably
right.
one of the most progressive in the country. Particularly in Montgomery County, where you have the piggyback tax, which is also progressively dominated. I don't think you need to get down to the level of going to college and there you got to have a progressive tuition there. I just don't think you need it. We want to encourage kids to go to college. We want to have a strong university system.
We want to encourage them to come to our colleges so that we keep their talent.
Correct.
And brain power
I just
here.
don't think you need to go that far down the progressive line of taxation and income.
So Jerry, we've heard from the others. Why shouldn't the rich pay more?
They already do. The scholarship thing is just a business model of giving discounts to people that make less money. So if you're upper middle class, you're not getting any of those anyway. And a lot of those people will pay their taxes that pay for these schools, and then they're going to send their kids to private schools. Yeah. And this doesn't happen just at the college level. If you compare Maryland, Fairfax and Montgomery County, there's about 30,000 more kids that go to private schools in Montgomery County.
Let's focus on colleges here, Jerry.
I am. But the issue already happens. And Mark hit the nail on the head. The cost of college has gone up 5 times the cost of everything else. So they ought to take the food court, the climbing wall, and all that and throw it away, give them crummy food. And college teachers only teach about 30% less than they used to a generation ago. A college professor job would be a retirement job for people that work as hard as we do.
What colleges need to adjust to, and Mark alluded to this earlier, is the fact that there is technology that can be used to hold down capital costs and hold down the operational costs of these huge edifices that are anachronism now.
They're using those technology costs to go to their cash flow because they're going to charge you the same money for an online course. So they're not using it to reduce the cost. They're using it to increase their cash flow. But I want to tell you something. Colleges are going to get hit by the internet, just like other industries, and they're going to get their guts ripped out in the next 30
But
years.
look, not
Steve, wrap it up.
everybody wants to go to iPad University, Casey. You may want to, but that's not what every student wants to do. There's a middle ground.
All right, well, you're going to have the last word, Steve. When we come back from this short break, congratulations, Mr. Hogan. You just won the election. Oh, and by the way, there's a $600 million deficit for next year. Thank you, Martin O'Malley. Good luck. Welcome back. The upset election of Larry Hogan as Maryland's next governor creates an interesting challenge for the Republican governor-elect, who now has to put an administration together and in a very few number of weeks fashion a legislative agenda from a campaign platform that was mainly focused on cutting taxes generally. And I'm going to say this charitably, there wasn't a lot of substance into how he was going to cut those taxes. Mark, is Hogan up for the new challenge?
Short answer, yes, but you probably want me to say more than that.
I would, yeah.
The deficit, or the prospect of a deficit, is probably the sort of worst kept secret. It was clear that that was happening. I think it was kind of telegraphed with the revenue numbers that were coming in this year. It's a manageable amount of money. I am confident that Hogan will be able to work with the legislators and also with a good team of people to be able to bring costs under control.
So why are you confident about that?
Frankly, given the $600 million out of $15 billion in tax revenues and also the other support, I think it's in the range that can be addressed by good management.
John, there were some other election pickups by Republicans that changed the face of the General Assembly. And so it's a different General Assembly than the one Bob Ehrlich had. Does Larry Hogan have a stronger hand when he comes to deal with Mike Miller and Mike Bush?
Not because of the pickups, but because of his personality. Frankly, I think Larry Hogan's a different person than Bob Ehrlich was. I think he's easier to work with in the sense that Bob Ehrlich went to Congress and sort of changed his focus in terms of who he was. I mean, Larry Hogan's an open book, and I think he'll be a lot easier if he continues that sort of transparency and easiness with the legislative leaders. I will tell you, I think his biggest problem is actually going to be the Republicans in the legislature. They are very conservative. They are more conservative than he is. And I think that's going to be a problem for him. I think he's going to get along better with Democrats than he does with Republicans.
Well, I want to ask Jerry about this because, Jerry, I mean, you would think, listening to John, that the Democrats are very comfortable with a Republican being elected governor. But I kind of remember on election night, there were people that were vowing that this would be a one-term governor.
I didn't say I was comfortable. I want to make that clear. I mean, I want to be clear. We would have preferred
but certainly
to have
there were a lot of Democrats who were vowing, who were outraged, and who were vowing that this would be a one-term governor, just like the last one.
Well, I want to challenge a couple of things. Number one, you said this was an upset victory. I wasn't upset at all. I don't know why you would say that. The second thing is, Larry Hogan, he's Irish and he'll work this out better than most, but it's really going to be a challenge in character for the Democratic Party because Martin O'Malley, Brown, and these clowns in Annapolis have bankrupted the state and really hurt it. Larry Hogan can't do this alone. The most devastating thing that would ever happen to the Democratic Party in the history of Maryland is if they lose the next election. And if they prioritize their political gain to defeat Hogan in the next election instead of helping the state of Maryland, then they don't have character. They have character
that
flaws.
I want to, Steve.
That email went out at
I want
midnight.
you to talk to Jerry about this because the reality is there's a 2-to-1 registration between Democrats and Republicans, and if half the Democrats come out, the Republican doesn't have a chance.
That's the way it should have been. Yeah, and it didn't happen. And you have people sitting on their hands, and you get what you have here. This was a debacle of an election. I'm not proud of what's happened to the party, but that's exactly it.
I got one more question to ask John, and this is about the election itself. Don't you think that your party has created some of this problem itself by creating these very safe Democratic districts, so that most of the party feels that after the primary, the gig is up. They don't have to come out. They don't have to do anything. If there were more competitive elections, there was 2, maybe 3 elections that were really intriguing. Don't you think that if there was a more competitive and less gerrymandering, it'd be better for the state and actually better for your party?
Honestly, I want to be very clear with you that there actually were a lot of Democrats who lost in legislative districts across the state. A lot of conservative Democrats lost their elections. So I don't think the gerrymandering is the problem. I will tell you that I think the state was pulled too far to the left, frankly, by Governor O'Malley. And I think that there was a hangover, really, from his administration.
Well, that's a great segue.
But I don't think it's going to last for 8 years.
Right.
I do think that Jerry's a little optimistic about what's going to happen 4 years from now.
So
frankly.
I'm going to ask you, we're going to switch topics now. And Steve, since we were talking about Martin O'Malley, do you think this loss is going to hurt his presidential ambitions?
I'm going to go like Mark. One word, yes.
You'll never be back on the show.
But I mean, it's a question is whether 2016 was in play anyway. It really wasn't. I mean, so it's a question of he might still be able to get in there, get in a large field, see what happens, get a name out there. This isn't about 2016 anyway. I don't know. It's a long time to 2020, 24. So he's a young guy. You might not say forever. Anything could happen, but it hurt. No question it hurt.
Any
and
Democrat,
2016 wasn't going to happen.
Any Democrat that can help get a Republican elected governor in the state of Maryland is toast, and a Democratic. O'Malley was delusional thinking he was going to be president. He's done, Brown's done, and Gansler's done.
Jerry, you would have said the same thing about Barack Obama. I mean,
there's 2 things that Barack Obama and O'Malley have in common. They've both run their last election.
Well, I think that's very glib and very nice. But I mean, the fact is, nobody 2 years before the presidential election actually predicted that Barack Obama was going to be the president.
Absolutely.
Barack Obama didn't have a track record. O'Malley has one, and it's pretty bad.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, because I think Martin O'Malley still has a viable chance if he wants to run in the Democratic primary.
But it may have to go through Senate first.
All right. Well, stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break. And welcome back. Now with his first parting shot, Steve Simon.
First and maybe last year. All right, I wrote this one out here because this is a quote.
Oh, no
I want
notes.
somebody to tell me who said this. We need to pass a law that candidates can only accept money from their district. This is congressional districts. Get the outside money out of the district so candidates are only running on money from within their district and not some other bankroll deal from halfway across the country that should have no dog in the fight. Who said that? Anybody?
The guy who lost.
That is Jesse the Governor Ventura, or Jesse the Body Ventura. And I think this is an issue that is going to resonate with people that are sick of what's going on nationally and everything. 82% disapproval in Congress. We got to do something differently.
Thank you. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
The voters this past week nationally voted for divided government. We have a Republican Congress and obviously continuing a Democratic president. And here in Maryland, we have a Republican governor and a Democratic legislature. Let's in Maryland show the way for how, while we have disagreements and we have principles that we don't, have collision on, there are areas for agreement and compromise, and let's make that work here in Maryland.
Thank you, Mark. Jerry.
Got a love story. Sunday night with Christie and Hogan before the election, Boyd got up and introduced his beautiful family. Larry got up and introduced his beautiful family. He turned over his shoulder and he looked at his father and he said, Dad, we might get a Governor Larry Hogan after all. Because his father had made an unsuccessful bid to be governor and given up a safe congressional seat. Larry Hogan ran, this wasn't a result of a 4-month campaign or 4 years to change Maryland. This was 40 years because Larry Hogan loved his father, he loved Maryland, he loves politics. That's why he ran, and that's why Maryland won.
Thank you, Jerry. John, you get back cleanup.
Real quickly, we didn't have a great turnout in this election. The turnout was down from previous years, and I would urge everyone to think about whether or not they had a chance to vote and didn't take it. These are your results.
Thank you, John. That was a rather depressing way to end the evening. But I want to thank the panel for being here.
Depressing evening for me, I'll tell you.
And I want to thank the viewers for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest-hitting political talk show. For 21 This Week, I'm Casey Aiken, and remember, you can follow us on Twitter, you can like us on Facebook, but more importantly, you can watch us on YouTube. I know what that is. For 21 This Week, I'm Casey Aiken.